Hey, everybody. Thank you for watching today. This is the first episode of Roll Up and Roll Out, a podcast featuring blue collar business owners, those that have worked in the blue collar field previously, those who are currently working, and owners that are looking at scaling and exiting, talking about the cool equipment, cool projects that they get to deal with, and some of the cool business owners and stuff that you come across as you've been in that career. Today, I've got Chris Bowen with me, who is the owner of Level Up Consulting and Marketing. And he was also a previous owner in a blue collar business. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Chris, and we'll get rolling.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it, man. So my name's Chris Bowen. I own Level Up Consulting and Marketing. My background's kind of in the pool and spa industry, the construction and the service side. So kind of as blue collar as it gets on that end. I've done everything from the $10 an hour pool cleaning up to building $250,000 and up pool projects. I've been on the owner side of it as well as the grunt kind of working in the business side of it as well. And so that's kind of my background is in that. Um, my company, first year in business, 2017, started at like 65 grand. Um, 5 years into it was doing about 5 million in business. So I was able to scale that business from just myself up to about 22 employees. So
What, so like initially when you started that, what was the catalyst, right? Because you said you were working for somebody before then, right? And I think that's a common thing in blue collar businesses. It's like, because I'm the same way. I worked for a bunch of other people, and all of a sudden I got it in my head that I'm like, I can do this, and I think I can do it better. And we just kind of have like that get shit done mentality of like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to build something with this. Like, what was that? What did that look like for you?
yeah, so it was a little bit part of that. So my experience prior to that was mostly in pools, but up like right before that, I was actually working in inside sales. So I was doing health insurance sales. And I just realized I absolutely hated it. Loved the people I worked with and worked for, but absolutely hated the job in itself, sitting on a dialer all day, making cold calls. And I'm like, I came home one day and I'm like, Courtney, I cannot do this anymore. Like, I can't just keep doing this. And she's like, what are you going to do? I said, well, I know the pool business. I think I'm just going to start a pool company. And she's like, you're an idiot. I was like, you're probably right, but we're going to just do it. So
I,
get
I
on
think
board
all
or,
I think all wives have like that preset, like you're an idiot, like just hardwired into their brain when we bring ideas to them.
that's exactly right. And I've learned over the years, hey, if I'm going to bring an idea to my wife, don't bring it to her when I don't have any information behind it. I need to have a game plan. I need to have my first 5 years planned out. Yeah,
yeah,
then do her.
but they want to have facts and data. They want to know they're going to be taken care of.
That is exactly right.
Yeah, right.
So I learned come with proof of concept if I'm going to pitch it an idea.
Right, and then you can take that and you can actually use that with lenders too, because lenders love to see
That's
proof of
exactly right.
concept, and they love to see financial statements that say this is how I'm going to make this money. So tell me about like those first years of running that business, and even now with what you're doing, some of the same things you're seeing in the businesses you're working with, and the kind of the mistakes and right decisions that they're making as they're trying to grow and figure this out, because there are common connectors there, I think.
Yeah, there's just so many things when you start a business versus when you get kind of established that you don't realize, you don't understand how lines of credit work. You don't understand how you can get net 30s and stuff like that with all your suppliers. Um, and I think one of the first things that people need to learn is how to manage cash flow. And that's one of the hardest things that you're going to run across, especially as you're scaling a business. In that it's always better to use other people's money rather than your own if you have the opportunity to. And making sure that you have all your financials in order so that you can do that.
Yeah.
So like we financed all of our vehicles. So at one point I had about 22 employees. I think half those were probably service guys or repair techs. And so I owned about 12 to 13 vehicles that we had. F-150s, vans. I had a masonry truck, trailers, all that fun stuff. And so kind of figuring out, you know, how much money do I put down on this stuff? How much can I finance? How do I finance it? And it took me a little while to figure those things out. I mean, to realize that, hey, I probably shouldn't be putting this stuff in my name. I probably need to be building my business credit.
Yeah.
Need to, and you end up paying a little bit higher interest rate when you put it in your business name versus your personal name. But you then find out how important it is to build that business credit, because when you go to get a loan or a line of credit, you know, it's not all reliant upon you personally.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a, I think when you look at the overarching industry as a whole, right? Like just in the blue collar world, it's really common for blue collar business owners to kind of come from being that grunt. And usually it's just like one or two things that sets us off where it's like this fucking guy that's my boss doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna go be better than him. And then we do, and we're stubborn and in a lot of ways stupid when we first start out. And
Yeah.
by that stubbornness and stupidity, that's how we somehow manage to grow and scale a company. But we don't know what we don't know. And so then all of a sudden when it comes to like actually like starting to learn how to run a business, it's like, oh crap. Um, I don't know how to read my P&L. I don't know how to read my financials. I just realized my bookkeeper was not doing this the right way, even though I thought they were, right? So now I've got thousands of dollars more I've got to pay in taxes.
Mhm.
And like what you said, like, yeah, sometimes it's attractive to finance something in your name because the interest is maybe cheaper, but we don't realize like when stuff goes wrong, it can really go wrong fast. And we don't want that to go and affect everything, every aspect of our life if we can avoid it, right? There are stages where you can and stages you can't. So, but that's a really common thing I think in that industry is just that kind of mentality of I'm just going to jump in and do it and I'll figure it out as I go. Well, I'm guessing if you could go back and know what you know now, what would it look like when you started it out? Like, what would you set up differently in that first like 6 months to a year versus what you did?
I've been making sure that I put stuff in my business name first over my personal name. I mean, no matter what, when you first start, you're going to have to be a personal guarantor, on things. That's just how it works. When you first get started, you don't have any business credit. But the first thing I would do is probably get with Dun and Bradstreet, establish that, you know, uh, that tax number with them, and just start building business credit. Because at some point you're going to need it. If you want to continue to grow, you're going to have access to lines of credit. You're going to have credit cards and things like that. And it's better that all that's set up in the beginning to be ran through your business versus you personally. So like, for example, I ended up having to go through a bankruptcy in my business, a couple years ago, and I had a lot of debt that I was a guarantor on. And so I ended up having to go through personal bankruptcy over it instead of just my business bankruptcy. So there's a lot of things that you kind of learn along the way and how things should be structured. And at the end, I had most of it structured the correct way, but there's still some of that debt that was, I had a personal guarantee on.
Yep. How far in was it, when when you started realizing like crap, things are going wrong, like what did that look like? How did you identify it initially? And then like what were some of the things that you kind of tried to do to avoid it? And, you know, just I think there are probably a lot of people out there, especially people that will be listening to this, that just from what I've talked to, there are a lot of business owners right now in a situation probably similar to where you were when it started. And one of the things that I hope to do with some of these conversations is like, hey, if these are some things that you're feeling or are experiencing right now, you need to just stop and really focus on what is my path out immediately and not think that things are going to get better.
That's exactly right. It was sales had started to slow a little bit. The year prior, I had sold our service division. And so I had actually exited a lot of those vehicle debts and stuff like that. And I was lucky; I had a lot of those paid off, so I owned them outright. And so when we sold that service size, I liquidated a lot of those assets and we reinvested it back into the business. And when that cash got eaten up, like that, $400,000, it's, kind of an awakening of what's going on right now. Oh, we had all these price increases. Oh, we didn't implement it. Oh, we didn't go back to some of these homeowners and try to collect, and we ended up paying for their backyard project. Like, oh crap, like what's going on? What do we need to fix? Can we fix it? And it was probably a few months prior to when we ended up going out of business that I noticed that, and it was like, okay, at this point, I don't know that I see a way out. So how do we lessen the burden of it? And how do we get as much accomplished as we possibly can in this short amount of time?
Yep.
And so I think had I been more in tune to what our books were, what our P&Ls look like, and all of our financials, and was keeping track of that more instead of relying on a third party to do that, I think that we could have seen it a lot sooner and adjusted and continued on with your business today.
Yeah. No, that's a really common thing with a lot of business owners in that area is they like to sell, they like to do projects, they like to work with their hands, they like to work with customers, but for whatever reason, they just pass their books off to somebody that does QuickBooks or like their accountant. And the fact of the matter is you are, and I say this with like your credit too and your personal guarantee is you are responsible for whatever happens to that. So you can't just pass stuff like that off to somebody else and just make assumptions. You can't pass your credit card off to an employee and, assume.
Expect them to have full access, and it's all good.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of the same thing, and knowing your net profit is such an important part of it because that's really your indicator and your needle to like how healthy your business is and how things are going. So
Well, and you can still have a net profit and not be and be cash poor, as well, and making sure that you're, using that credit wisely and those lines of credit correctly to be able to, have correct cash flow in your business too.
you know,
Those are things that you don't just know. You have to learn from it, and you have to figure it out. And you should always have consult with your CPA. You should always have a CPA and you should always have a books person. But one of the things that I've learned since then is, hey, we should be having like a monthly meeting. We should be looking at this every single month or every other week or whatever it is, to where we're planning and we're not just, going on as business as usual, but every month we have a plan and we stick to that plan.
yep. And that's where I think like fractional CFO really kind of comes in handy with that because they do kind of look. So CPAs traditionally look at things in the past, right? So they look at this stuff. Where the fractional CFOs and really, kind of where I'm finding a nice little niche with what I do is like really helping people like think to the future and look at like what our numbers are. And like my educational piece is like, stop taking lending lightly. Like you need to have, it's just as important to have a strategy in place for how you're going to acquire loans and how you're going to use them as it is, I think, to have a financial plan in place for how are we going to hit our sales goals? How are we going to do this and, accomplish them? Because if you get to a point where you need lending and you're not ready for it, you can get into some really bad loans really fast. So,
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. A lot of what those people don't tell you is some of those loans that if you're trying to get a loan fast, those loans are like 30% interest or higher.
and you're like, pay weekly or daily payments on them. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And if you're already cash poor,
You can't do it.
they're going to bury you. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's correct type of debt to take and there's incorrect type of debt to take.
Yeah. If it's an emotional response, it's probably not the right thing. But
That's
thankfully,
exactly
you know, I was working with a couple guys and they're kind of in that situation too. Where they're like, we don't know what to do. I'm like, you're sitting here, you're cutting expenses. I was like, who's out selling right now? And they're like, no one. I'm like, well, let's start there.
there's problems.
It's the fastest way to make your money, right? Is sell. And let's avoid these loans if we can, because these loans are going to hurt. So that's cool. But the other piece I want to know too is like, what are some, what were your favorite at like parts of running that business? And if you had an opportunity to run a business like that again, would you jump into it, or are you kind of like, I had my experience. I don't know that I need to do it again.
I go back and forth on that. I loved every bit of it, man. I really did. I had a great experience with it 90% of the time. And it's one of those things. I'm somebody, I don't have a college education. And so, my wife, my parent, or my mom, my brother, they all had college educations. And so I know that, if I'm going to do something with my life, it's either going to be a skilled trade, B, it's going to be in sales, or C, owning my own business. And owning your own business kind of incorporates those other two in this industry. You know, um, it requires you to be skilled in a lot of different areas. When you're building pools, you have to know groundwork, you have to know plumbing, rebar schedules, you have to know, a little bit of engineering involved with it, stonework, concrete work, all of those things to be able to do it correctly.
Mhm.
Um, and so it does require that blue collar, style mentality a lot of times. Um, it wouldn't hurt to have an education, but
You
you
know,
know, you figure it out, you learned.
we were joking, and kind of the theme for the podcast came around one time. It's like if you don't have a college degree, then you might as well have your get shit done degree, right? Like just
That's exactly
get
right.
these things together. Sometimes common sense is more important than
It absolutely
formal
can.
education. In a lot of cases, I've seen some people that don't have a formal degree or common sense, and that's just an unfortunate existence, or maybe a good existence because they seem happy as
That's exactly right. Because they just don't know what's going on around them.
they they almost seem happier than all the rest of us. So
That's
so it's like
exactly right.
so so now you're a sales rep for a tile company, and then you're also doing consulting and marketing. So with your consulting and marketing company, like what is your focus on that business, and who are you working with, and like what's the approach you take with your clients?
Yeah, so it's focused on working with small business owners who work in the pool and spa industry, home renovations, people in hardscape, really, the blue collar guys, maybe the plumbers, maybe the carpenters, things like that, and helping them grow their small business, and implementing some of the stuff that we did to scale really, really fast. And to kinda drive those sales and to brand, because a lot of them, they don't know how to market, they don't know how to do branding, they don't know, um, anything other than maybe their trade. They don't know how to do the sales process and things like that, and so teaching them kinda what we did to go from a company that was doing $65,000 to within 5 years doing, $5,000,000.
Yeah, which is
Uh,
incredible.
yeah, you know, it's it's not as easy as people think.
Now, here, I mean, even starting your own business out of your house, right? Like everybody glamorizes entrepreneurship at any level.
It's not glamorous.
No, there's nothing glamorous at all, especially in your first year, because it's a lot of like hard lessons. Even if you know and you're an educator, right? And you've had experience doing all these different systems, like it's a different level of pressure and exposure on yourself if you've never done it before. Like I came from a
It's stressful.
yeah, very stressful. I came from a W-2 world prior to jumping into entrepreneurship, and um, it's I ran dealerships from a general sales manager level. I was a sales director and a leadership member for a egg tire company that, grew from 16 million to just around 30-ish million dollars in a year. Um, and I was good at what I was doing. Now as a business owner myself, what I found is like, okay, I was really good at doing my own thing. Now that I'm responsible for everything, like there are a lot of aspects of things that I don't know, or like I got to do the things I don't like doing in order to grow and expand, right?
That's
So
exactly right.
as you're working with these new businesses doing marketing stuff, is that kind of what you're seeing as you're coming in and trying to offset the stuff that they just don't want to spend time doing? Is that
That's exactly right. That's more or less what it is. It's finding, who's their ideal client, because a lot of people don't know who that is. They don't know how to find that. They don't know what they should be doing. They don't know what they should be talking about. And creating a message that they can push forward, um, to help get that ideal client. I find that that's what they don't understand is you have to be consistent in that message like always and just continue to push the message. That way you get the clients that you want.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to say yes to every sale.
Yeah.
As a business owner, you should be able to pick and choose who your clients are the same way a client's picking and choosing the contractor that they want to work with.
Yeah. That's actually, I think a really good point because as you're starting out, I think there is definitely a time where you just don't really have a choice. You take whatever kind of,
Yeah, you take whatever's
you
coming.
take whatever meat's at the door with,
Exactly.
ripe, raw, rotten, whatever, you just take it. But as you put a plan in place and you start to really identify your niche market, the whole plan around that should be making your job fun. Like, you're in your ideal world when everything seems to kind of come easily and that the effort's still there, I think, but you don't feel it because you're doing the things that you enjoy. Like, I really enjoy presenting and educating. I hate putting together funnels and marketing plans, right? So like when I get to that point, I will be hiring somebody to run all that stuff for me because I don't find any enjoyment there. Yeah.
Well, and if it's not something you enjoy and it's something that you know you're not good at, that's probably one of the first hires you should make as a small business owner.
Yes.
You want people that are contributing to your weaknesses. You don't wanna hire a bunch of people that are just like you.
Yep.
As great as that sounds as to have, 5 Pauls running around, that's not what you need. That's not
No.
what your business needs.
And I don't know if you've experienced it. I've seen this with businesses where they're naturally the good salesperson, right? And their first hire is like a salesperson. And then they go and do the project management stuff and they maybe are good at it, but that salesperson, number one, shouldn't ever be really your first hire, I think, as a business, especially in contracting or any kind of like job where you're doing any estimating, because they're not going to protect your bottom line margins like you will.
No.
And they're not going to sell your company like you will.
No, absolutely not. That's one of those things that until you have, those systems in place and kind of those foolproof ways to go through your entire sales process, you probably shouldn't hire a salesperson. Because exactly like you said, nobody's going to care about that bottom dollar the way that you do unless it's tied to a profit margin.
Mhm.
That's how they get paid. But if it's, they get paid per sale or they get paid a percentage of gross, they don't care. Why would
Yeah.
they?
No. So we'll be wrapping it up real quick on the podcast here. But before we do, what was your favorite piece of equipment or your favorite vehicle that you had when you had your company?
Man, I miss my big truck. I loved my Chevy 2500 more than life itself. That thing was amazing. It was super comfortable to drive. I'm not a big heavy machinery fan personally. Um, but I did not mind carrying around our trailers with that bad boy.
Yeah.
That was a good time always.
What do you still have a pickup now, or did you have to downsize?
So right now, yeah, no, I ended up getting rid of it. I got a like just killer deal on a Chevy Equinox little SUV where I pay like $100 a month for it. So
Can't complain about that.
you can't.
So,
Someday I'll get that truck back.
well, hey man, I appreciate your time and I appreciate you having me on the show. If anyone that's watching is looking for, help with the consulting or marketing, like what's the best way for them to kind of reach out and contact you?
Yes, and the best way is going to be through our website. It is lvluptx.net, leveluptexas.net, or you can send us an email at leveluptexas.net.
Awesome. No, I appreciate your time, Chris, and I look forward to interacting with you more moving forward. And for that, everybody, thanks for watching. This is the first episode of Roll Up, Roll Out. I look forward to seeing where this takes us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.